All right, let's speak to Dan Perry, the former chief of Associated Press in Europe, Africa and Middle East. Thank you for joining us live from Tel Aviv. Dan, vicious is what Trump earlier called Israel's Beirut attack. But Netanyahu has said that Israel will continue Lebanon with or without a deal. So do you think this signals perhaps a split in the goals between the two countries, given that they started this war together?
Yeah, I think there clearly is a split. There are vastly different interests. Israel really does feel threatened by Hezbollah and really is determined to remove Hezbollah with speed. It's evident that Trump thinks that's a secondary issue. Also, Netanyahu almost certainly thinks there's political benefit for him in his very difficult re-election bid and continuing the wars because something good might happen, whereas right now he's way, way, way behind and pretty much headed for defeat. Obviously, Trump wants to end wars because of all his own domestic concerns, the midterm elections, the war is unpopular, the economic fallout of the blocking of the Persian Gulf and Strait of Hormuz, for which he did not prepare the American allies, the American public, nor America's allies. And so clearly we have a divergence. And I would say also that Trump identified that there is a feeling in the American body politic that he was sort of led by the nose by Netanyahu, convinced to start a war that was strategically, it emerges unwise by Netanyahu's manipulations, whether that's fair or unfair, true or untrue. Marco Rubio seemed to confirm it on March 2nd when he said they had to go to war because Israel's going to attack anyway and then America's assets would be attacked. That was incredible. It was a problem for Trump. And so we see this unprecedented rupture where Trump is cursing out Netanyahu, leaking it to the press, saying that Netanyahu takes or avoids action at Trump's pleasure. I've never seen such a thing in public in the Israeli-American relationship. And it obviously is damaging to Israel's strategic equity as well.
Right now, Trump thinks, this is what he said earlier at the G7 summit, without the US or me, and I quote this, there will be no Israel. Well, people in Israel, I remember when I was covering a lot of what was going on with Gaza, people really saw Trump as sort of maybe perhaps a savior in a way. Do you think they'll think or interpret this as Trump throwing Israel under the bus, so to speak, just to get a deal over the line? Or is all of this simply, perhaps in some people's opinion, optics?
Oh, they're going to interpret Trump as throwing Israel under the bus. That's why the deal is incredibly unpopular. They're also going to interpret Trump as throwing the interests of the Iranian people, the Lebanese people, and America's broader strategy under the bus. Remember that Trump started the war initially to save the Iranian people, saying help is on its way. And on the first day, he suggested the goal is regime change. Now suddenly he says the goal is not regime change. And look at the result. I mean, no promises even are being demanded of Iran not to massacre protesters again. No democratic reform, certainly. No limitations on the missile program, even though they just struck at America's Persian Gulf allies. No talk of ending Iran's aggression against the Middle East via terrorist proxies from Yemen to Lebanon to Palestine and beyond. I mean, it's unbelievable. Not even very much on a nuclear file, which is supposedly a big success. Iran is going to make some promises, as they've always made. And the best case scenario, maybe, is in 60 days we'll have some reprising of the JCPOA, which Trump walked away from and had presented in the past as a ridiculous disgrace. So it doesn't look good. These are real strategic interests of America, not just of Israel. And Trump is walking away from all of it for political reasons. And, you know, at the end of the day, they started this war without a plan for the inevitable blocking of the Strait of Hormuz, without the allies on side, after Trump had been belittling and insulting his allies for a year and absurdly threatening to invade the territory of NATO ally Denmark. We see where it brought the Western world at this point. The Iranian regime is, if anything, strengthened. They're about to get tens of billions of dollars. The Iranian opposition is demoralized. Such are the wages of foolishness and hubris.
Dan, it's interesting you say that the Iranian regime is strengthened, because when you actually look at the very detailed Netanyahu statement from overnight, he actually, the way I read it, was trying to perhaps convince the Israeli public that everything he has done and all his war decisions, whether it was Gaza, Lebanon, and so on and so forth, was the right thing. And it's actually in the interest of the country. Who's he trying to convince and why? He's
trying to convince gullible Israeli voters. he put Israel through an almost 3-year nightmare that has trashed its international reputation, has landed him in trouble at The Hague, has caused countries to flirt with an informal boycott of Israel, has massively disrupted Israel's economy, has embroiled society in a situation where people important to the economy have been spending hundreds of days reserve duty and being killed in Gaza and Lebanon. Israel is almost friendless in the world. They put all their eggs in a basket of Trump. They alienated the Europeans. They alienated the American Democrats. Of course, they never had the anti-Semites and isolationists on the American far right. So they're left with Trump and maybe Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz. And now here it is with Trump basically presenting Netanyahu as a puppet and a vassal. It's obviously bad. He had promised to eradicate Hezbollah, to eradicate Hamas, and to bring down a regime in Iran. And, personally, as I've said on Al Jazeera many times, these would have been favors to the people of Lebanon, Palestine, and Iran, respectively. These organizations are not popular. They're criminals against their own people. But none of it has been accomplished. And too many innocents have been killed. And now their last remaining friend in the world, really, theoretically, Trump, Netanyahu's last remaining friend, is presenting him as a puppet. It's not good. The Israelis aren't happy. They paid a big price for too small a return. And Netanyahu obviously hopes to close the gap in the polls. He's down by about 20 seats out of 120, 70 to 50 in all the polls. The polls in Israel are not wrong. If they're wrong, they're off by 1 seat. So unless something changes dramatically, he's headed for defeat, which is why we now have Trump suggesting that Netanyahu may not even run in the election. I don't rule it out because, of course, he has his legal complications. If he's no longer prime minister, he can't sort of, manhandle the system into giving him a pass and delaying his trial so he could well end up in jail. He's definitely in trouble, but he's an extremely good, debater, and he has excellent rhetoric, and he's going to try to deploy it to convince people that up is down and left is right.
All right, thanks very much for your thoughts, Dan Perry, there, former chief of AP in Europe, Africa and the Middle East, on Netanyahu and the relationship with Trump. Thank you.